Chase Deo was a man of discipline and routine, his life shaped by years of service in the Air Force, but nothing could have prepared him for the day his heart stopped and he found himself hovering above his own lifeless body. As medical staff fought to revive him, Chase was pulled into a void of unimaginable darkness. What he encountered there and the divine intervention that followed would forever change his understanding of life, death, and our true purpose on Earth. The day that would change Chase Deo's life forever began like any other. At 0500 hours, his internal clock, honed by years of military service, roused him from sleep. Chase's morning routine was a testament to the discipline instilled during his time in the Air Force. He made his bed with crisp corners, performed a series of push-ups and sit-ups, and then headed for a brisk 5-mile run. As he jogged through the quiet streets of his neighborhood, Chase reflected on his transition to civilian life. The structure and purpose of his military career had been replaced by a comfortable, if somewhat predictable, existence. He worked as a security consultant, applying the skills he'd acquired during his years of service to help businesses protect their assets. Returning home, Chase showered and prepared for work. He donned his usual attire, a pressed white shirt, dark slacks and polished shoes. As he knotted his tie, a strange sensation washed over him. It was a feeling of lightheadedness, accompanied by an odd tingling in his left arm. Chase paused, his hand still on the tie, and took a deep breath. The sensation passed as quickly as it had come. Dismissing the episode, Chase continued his morning routine. He'd faced far worse during his tours of duty, including a harrowing mission in Afghanistan where his unit had been pinned down by enemy fire for hours. A little dizziness was nothing to worry about, he told himself. As Chase drove to work, the discomfort returned, more intense this time. A dull ache spread across his chest, and his left arm felt heavy and numb. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the car's air conditioning. Chase gripped the steering wheel tighter, his military training kicking in as he focused on maintaining control of the vehicle. He pulled into the parking lot of his office building, his breathing now labored and shallow. The world around him seemed to blur and tilt. Chase fumbled for his phone, his fingers clumsy and uncooperative. He managed to dial 911 just as another wave of pain crashed over him. The dispatcher's voice sounded distant and muffled as Chase struggled to explain his situation. He could hear the panic in his own voice, so unlike the calm demeanor he'd maintained in combat situations. As he waited for the ambulance, Chase's thoughts turned to his family, to the life he'd built since leaving the Air Force. A sense of regret washed over him for all the things left unsaid and undone. The wail of sirens pierced the air, growing louder as they approached. Chase's vision began to darken around the edges. He was vaguely aware of voices shouting and hands lifting him onto a gurney. The last thing he saw was the concerned face of a paramedic leaning over him. Then, in an instant, everything changed. Chase felt a sudden, profound sense of lightness. The pain vanished, replaced by an otherworldly calm. He found himself looking down at his own body on the gurney, surrounded by frantic medical personnel. As Chase's heart monitor flatlined, he realized with startling clarity that he was no longer bound to his physical form. His consciousness, free from the constraints of his body, began to drift away from the chaotic scene below. As Chase's consciousness drifted, a startling realization struck him. He could see everything with crystal clarity, yet he no longer inhabited his body. What happens when the mind separates from its physical shell? Chase was about to embark on a journey that would challenge everything he thought he knew about life and death. Chase found himself suspended above the chaotic scene, a silent observer detached from the frantic efforts to revive his lifeless form. The paramedics' movements seemed both urgent and strangely slow, as if time itself had become distorted. He noticed details he would have overlooked in life: the worried creases on a young EMT's forehead, The worn edges of the gurney's straps, the faint coffee stain on a doctor's white coat. As the reality of his situation sank in, panic began to rise within Chase. He tried to call out, to reach for the people below, but his voice produced no sound, and his hands passed through solid objects like mist. The disconnect between his consciousness and his physical form was profound and unsettling. How could he feel more present, more aware than ever before, while his body lay motionless? Chase's mind raced, grappling with the implications of his current state. Was this death, or something beyond his understanding of life and consciousness? The military training that had prepared him for countless dangerous situations offered no guidance in this otherworldly realm. He felt vulnerable and exposed, stripped of the physical strength and skills he had relied on for so long. As Chase observed the scene below, he became aware of a shift in his surroundings. The hospital corridor began to fade, its edges blurring and dissolving into a soft, ethereal light. A sensation of weightlessness enveloped him, and he felt his awareness expanding beyond the confines of the physical world. Time seemed to stretch and bend, moments extending into eternities. Suddenly, Chase sensed a powerful force tugging at the very essence of his being. It was violent and all-consuming, pulling him away from the familiar world he knew. The force grew stronger, and Chase realized with a mix of terror and anticipation that his journey was far from over. He was being drawn into the unknown, leaving behind the boundaries of his earthly existence. As the hospital scene receded into the distance, Chase felt a profound sense of transition. The world he had known, with its routines, responsibilities, and physical limitations, was falling away. Ahead lay a vast, uncharted realm that both frightened and beckoned him. What wonders or horrors awaited in this new dimension of existence? Chase surrendered to the pull of the mysterious force, his consciousness accelerating into the unknown. The last vestiges of his earthly life faded from view, replaced by an all-encompassing darkness that seemed to hold infinite possibilities. As he plunged deeper into this void, Chase knew that the next phase of his extraordinary journey was about to begin, one that would test the limits of his courage and forever alter his understanding of reality. The darkness that enveloped Chase was unlike anything he had ever encountered. It wasn't merely the absence of light, but a living, breathing void that seemed to reach out and envelop him. As he plunged deeper into this abyss, Chase realized that this darkness was a malevolent presence waiting to consume him. The suffocating dread filled his entire being, growing more intense with each passing moment. Chase's military training had prepared him for extreme conditions, but nothing could have readied him for this overwhelming sense of isolation and fear. Every instinct in his soul screamed that this wasn't a place he wanted to go, yet he was powerless to stop his descent. As the darkness pressed in around him, Chase struggled to make sense of his surroundings. He tried to focus on his breathing, a technique he had used during high-stress combat situations. But here, in this void, he couldn't even feel his own chest rising and falling. The familiar rhythms of his body were gone, replaced by a disconcerting weightlessness. The psychological effects of this sensory deprivation began to take their toll. Chase's mind, deprived of any external stimuli, started to create its own reality. At first, it was just a faint whisper at the edge of his consciousness, but soon the sound grew louder and more distinct. A distant wailing emerged from the darkness, guttural and raw, filled with an anguish that chilled him to his core. Chase tried to rationalize these sounds, telling himself they were hallucinations brought on by stress and fear. But as the wailing intensified, multiplying into a cacophony of tormented voices, he couldn't shake the feeling that these cries were all too real. The air grew heavy, and the suffocating dread intensified, filling every corner of his being. Just when Chase thought he couldn't bear another moment in this hellish void, something shifted. Shapes began to materialize in the darkness, forms that seemed to be in a perpetual state of decay. These grotesque beings emerged from the shadows, their misshapen bodies a testament to unimaginable suffering. As they surrounded Chase, he felt a chilling grip on his arm. An icy pain shot through him, a physical sensation that seemed impossible in this non-corporeal state. The beings drew closer, their anguished cries now deafening. Chase's terror reached new heights as he realized he was trapped with no means of escape from these nightmarish entities. In that moment of utter despair, Chase understood that his journey into darkness was far from over. The true horror was just beginning, and he would soon face a confrontation that would test the very limits of his courage and sanity. Chase Deo's journey into darkness took a nightmarish turn as he came face to face with entities beyond his worst imaginings. What he encountered next would shatter his understanding of suffering and force him to confront the darkest aspects of his own soul. The beings surrounding Chase were the very embodiment of torment. Their bodies were contorted in unnatural ways, as if shaped by countless eons of agony. Hollow eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, reflecting an emptiness that seemed to stretch into eternity. These weren't mere apparitions, they were suffering itself made flesh, their very presence a testament to unimaginable despair. As the entities drew closer, Chase felt an overwhelming urge to flee, but there was nowhere to run in this realm of darkness. The beings reached out with gnarled limbs, their touch sending icy tendrils of fear through his non-corporeal form. A cacophony of anguished screams and guttural groans filled the air, punctuated by a strange, mocking laughter that resonated deep within Chase's being. The psychological impact of this encounter was devastating. Chase's military training, which had prepared him for the horrors of war, offered no defense against these manifestations of pure anguish. He felt his courage and resolve crumbling, replaced by a suffocating sense of hopelessness. The beings seemed to feed on his fear, growing stronger and more numerous with each passing moment. As Chase struggled against the tide of despair, he was suddenly thrust into a brutal review of his life. Every selfish decision, every missed opportunity to show love or compassion, played out before him in excruciating detail. It wasn't simply a replay of events. Chase relived each moment, experiencing the pain he had caused others as if it were his own. The weight of his regrets pressed down upon him, threatening to crush his very essence. The line between tormentor and tormented began to blur. Chase realized with horror that he was not so different from these suffering entities. His own fears, regrets, and failures had brought him to this place of darkness. The beings' cries of anguish became his own, their pain intertwining with his in a nightmarish tapestry of shared suffering. As his strength and hope drained away, Chase felt himself slipping deeper into the abyss. The boundaries of his identity began to dissolve, and he feared he would be lost forever in this realm of eternal torment. In that moment of ultimate despair, Chase understood the true nature of hell, not a place of fire and brimstone, but a state of complete separation from love and light. Overwhelmed by the weight of his regrets and the suffocating presence of the beings, Chase reached the point of complete surrender. He had no fight left in him, no spark of hope to cling to. As he teetered on the brink of oblivion, Chase realized that his journey through darkness had led him to confront the deepest, most painful truths about himself and the human condition. Little did Chase know that this moment of utter despair would become the crucible from which a profound transformation would emerge. As he surrendered to the darkness, a glimmer of something new began to stir within the depths of his being, a flicker of light that would challenge the very foundations of this realm of suffering. Imagine standing before a being of pure love and authority, feeling simultaneously unworthy and completely accepted. For Chase Deo, this paradox became his reality as he found himself in the presence of Jesus. But this wasn't just a passive encounter. Chase was about to receive a message that would change not only his life, but potentially the course of humanity. As the infinite light enveloped him, Chase felt an overwhelming sense of awe and reverence. The figure before him radiated an authority that transcended anything he had ever experienced. This wasn't the gentle, familiar Jesus from Sunday school stories. The being Chase encountered possessed a presence so powerful it made him question everything he thought he knew about existence itself. Chase felt both unworthy and inexplicably accepted in the presence of this divine being. The weight of standing before Jesus was almost unbearable, yet Chase felt a profound sense of peace wash over him. It was as if every cell in his being recognized the source of all love and light. The communication between Chase and Jesus defied conventional understanding. Words seemed inadequate to describe the exchange. Instead, Chase felt a resonating presence within him, conveying messages that transcended language. Emotions, understanding, and revelations flowed through him like a river of pure consciousness. In this timeless moment, Chase experienced a life review unlike anything he could have imagined. It wasn't merely a recollection of memories, but an intense emotional journey where he felt the weight of his actions and choices. He relived moments of kindness and selflessness with profound joy, but also faced the consequences of his mistakes with startling clarity. This review wasn't about judgment, but understanding and growth. As the life review concluded, Chase sensed a shift in the divine presence. There was an air of anticipation, as if Jesus was preparing to reveal something of great importance. Chase felt his consciousness expand, ready to receive whatever message or vision was about to be shared. The atmosphere grew heavy with significance as Jesus began to show Chase a series of visions. These weren't mere images, but vivid experiences that engulfed his entire being. Chase understood with crystal clarity that what he was about to witness would shape his purpose for the rest of his life. As the visions began to unfold, Chase felt a mix of fear and determination. He knew that the message he was about to receive carried an immense responsibility. Whatever he was about to see, whatever task he was about to be given, would require courage and unwavering commitment. In that moment, suspended in a realm of infinite light and love, Chase Deo stood on the precipice of a profound revelation. The visions that followed would not only change his life, but would carry a message of urgent importance for all of humanity. As Chase prepared to receive this divine insight, he knew that his journey was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. The serene radiance surrounding Chase gave way to a series of chilling images: cities aflame, societies crumbling, humanity tearing itself apart. These weren't just abstract concepts, but vivid scenes playing out before his eyes. What could these terrifying visions mean for our world, and why was Chase chosen to bear witness? As the visions unfolded, Chase found himself transported to a world in chaos. He saw raging fires consuming vast forests, their smoke blotting out the sun. Coastal cities crumbled as rising seas reclaimed the land, while inland, drought turned fertile fields to dust. The air was thick with desperation and fear. The scenes shifted rapidly, each more devastating than the last. Chase witnessed wars erupting over dwindling resources, masses of refugees fleeing uninhabitable regions, and societies fracturing under the weight of inequality and hatred. He felt the pain and suffering of countless individuals as if it were his own, their anguish cutting through him like a knife. As Chase struggled to process the onslaught of images, he realized these weren't just possible futures. They were glimpses of a path humanity was already walking. The greed, apathy, and hatred he witnessed were reflections of present-day actions and attitudes, their consequences magnified and made manifest. The visions grew more intense, building to a fever pitch. Chase saw explosions rocking major cities, heard the screams of the injured and dying. He watched helplessly as famine and disease swept across continents, leaving devastation in their wake. The world he knew was unraveling before his eyes, and he felt powerless to stop it. Throughout this harrowing experience, Chase sensed Jesus' presence beside him, a silent witness to humanity's potential downfall. There was sadness in this divine companionship, but also an urgency, a clear message that this future was not yet set in stone. As the visions reached their climax, Chase understood the weight of the responsibility being placed upon him. He had been granted this glimpse into a possible future, not to despair, but to act. The urgency of his mission became crystal clear. He had to warn others, to inspire change before it was too late. The final vision faded, leaving Chase breathless and shaken. He turned to Jesus, his heart brimming with questions and a newfound determination. But before he could speak, he felt a familiar pulling sensation. The realm of light began to recede, and Chase realized his time in this divine presence was coming to an end. As he prepared to return to the physical world, Chase knew he was forever changed. The visions he had witnessed would drive him forward, fueling a mission to awaken humanity to the consequences of its actions. With a mixture of trepidation and resolve, Chase braced himself for the journey back, knowing that his real work was about to begin. The boundary between the spiritual and physical realms is not a gentle threshold, but a violent collision of realities. As Chase's spirit reconnected with his body, he experienced a sensation so intense and overwhelming that it would forever alter his perception of human existence. What happens when the infinite collides with the finite? Chase's eyes snapped open, the harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital room assaulting his senses. The stark contrast between the radiant light he had encountered during his near-death experience and the sterile environment of the hospital was jarring. He felt as if he had been thrust from a realm of infinite possibilities back into a world of rigid limitations. The weight of his physical body crashed down upon him, a crushing pressure on his chest that made every breath a struggle. This discomfort, common among near-death experience survivors, served as a stark reminder of the corporeal nature of his existence. Chase's mind reeled, trying to reconcile the profound spiritual journey he had just undergone with the beeping monitors and concerned faces surrounding him. As the medical staff expressed their astonishment and relief at his revival, Chase felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility. The voice of Jesus echoed in his mind, urging him to share what he had seen and warn others about the chaotic future he had witnessed. Yet, as he opened his mouth to speak, he found himself unable to articulate the depth and reality of his encounter with the spiritual realm. In the aftermath of his revival, Chase experienced a surreal quality to life. Everything around him seemed both hyperreal and insignificant simultaneously. The mundane details of the hospital room, the ticking clock, the squeaking shoes of nurses in the hallway, took on an almost dreamlike quality. Chase struggled to ground himself in this familiar yet now foreign world. Overwhelmed by the need to document every detail of his experience, Chase began to journal obsessively. His hand moved across the pages with frantic energy, as if afraid that the profound truths he had encountered might slip away if not immediately captured. This act of writing became a lifeline, a way to bridge the gap between the spiritual realm he had visited and the physical world he now inhabited. As the hours turned into days, Chase grappled with the magnitude of what he had experienced. The visions of a world in peril weighed heavily on his mind, driving him to share his message despite the uncertainty of how it would be received. He knew that his journey was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. With a mixture of trepidation and determination, Chase prepared himself for the challenge of communicating his experience to others. He understood that not everyone would be ready to hear the profound truths he had encountered. Yet, the urgency of his mission propelled him forward, ready to face whatever skepticism or ridicule might come his way. What happens when an extraordinary experience collides with ordinary doubt? As Chase began to share his story, he found himself caught between two worlds, one of profound spiritual truth and another of deep-seated skepticism. The battle that ensued would not only test his resolve, but potentially alter the course of his divine mission. Chase's first attempts to share his near-death experience with friends and family were met with a mixture of confusion, concern, and outright disbelief. As he recounted his encounter with Jesus and the terrifying visions of humanity's future, he watched their expressions shift from curiosity to skepticism. One close friend, a fellow veteran, listened patiently before suggesting, "You were dead, Chase. Your brain probably just fired off random images while it was shutting down." These dismissive reactions cut deep, challenging Chase's certainty about what he had experienced. He found himself reliving the vivid details of his journey beyond death, questioning whether it could have been a hallucination or a product of his oxygen-deprived brain. The weight of doubt pressed upon him, threatening to overwhelm the profound sense of purpose he had felt in the presence of the divine. As days turned into weeks, Chase's frustration grew. He felt an urgent need to convey the warnings he had received, yet every attempt to share his message seemed to push people further away. Some friends began to avoid him, while others suggested he seek psychological help. The isolation he felt was palpable, a stark contrast to the all-encompassing love he had experienced in the spiritual realm. Chase grappled with an internal struggle between his unwavering belief in what he had witnessed and the self-doubt planted by others' reactions. He began to question whether he was truly meant to share this message. Perhaps he thought the experience was meant solely for his own spiritual growth. The temptation to give up on his mission grew stronger with each passing day. Just as Chase was on the verge of retreating into silence, he encountered a small group of individuals who approached his story with open minds. Among them was a grief counselor who had worked with hospice patients and heard similar accounts of near-death experiences. Their genuine interest and thoughtful questions reignited Chase's determination to share his message. These unexpected allies reminded Chase that he wasn't alone in his experience. They shared stories of others who had glimpsed the afterlife and returned with a renewed sense of purpose. Their support created a safe space for Chase to explore the profound implications of his journey, without fear of judgment. Emboldened by this newfound support, Chase realized that the skepticism he faced was part of his journey. Each doubt he overcame strengthened his resolve and deepened his understanding of the message he carried. He began to see that his mission wasn't just about sharing a personal experience, but about challenging people to reconsider their understanding of life, death, and the choices that shape our collective future. With renewed determination, Chase decided to expand his efforts to share his message. He knew the path ahead would be challenging, filled with both believers and skeptics. But the urgency of his vision and the potential to ignite positive change in the world drove him forward. As he prepared to take his story to a wider audience, Chase steeled himself for the trials and triumphs that lay ahead. Imagine standing before a room full of strangers, tasked with convincing them that you've glimpsed the future of humanity. For Chase, this wasn't just a thought experiment, it was his new reality. As he began sharing his near-death experience publicly, he discovered that some truths are almost too profound for words. Chase's first public speaking engagements were small community gatherings, intimate settings where he could test the waters of public reaction. As he stood before these groups, Chase felt the weight of his message pressing upon him. How could he possibly convey the overwhelming love of the light or the terrifying visions of chaos and destruction he had witnessed? Words seemed woefully inadequate to capture the profound nature of his experience. The reactions from audience members were as diverse as they were intense. Some listeners sat in rapt attention, their eyes wide with wonder and their faces etched with emotion. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, skepticism evident in their furrowed brows and crossed arms. Chase could almost feel the internal struggle of those grappling with the implications of his story. As Chase continued to share his experience, he noticed a pattern emerging. While many reacted with disbelief, there were always a few who listened with genuine interest. These individuals approached him after his talks, asking thoughtful questions and sharing their own spiritual encounters. Their openness encouraged Chase to delve deeper into his story, exploring the nuances of his journey and its implications for humanity. The challenge of translating his experience into words forced Chase to dig deep within himself. He began journaling obsessively, organizing his thoughts and emotions about his near-death experience. This process not only helped him find clarity, but also enabled him to articulate his message more effectively to his audiences. As word of Chase's story spread, he found himself speaking to larger groups and even sharing his experience online. To his surprise, he began receiving messages from people around the world. Some shared their own near-death experiences, while others expressed how his story had given them hope during difficult times. Chase realized that his mission wasn't about convincing everyone, but about reaching those who were ready to hear the message. With each engagement, Chase's confidence grew. He began to understand that his role wasn't to single-handedly save the world, but to ignite small flames of hope, love, and faith in others. These individual sparks, he believed, could collectively create a ripple effect of positive change. As Chase's message started to resonate with more people, he felt a profound sense of purpose. The doubt and ridicule he had initially faced seemed to fade into the background, overshadowed by the impact his story was having on others. Chase understood that his journey of spreading the light was far from over, but he was ready for the challenges ahead, knowing that each person he reached brought humanity one step closer to the brighter future he had glimpsed. Chase Deo's near-death experience didn't just change his perspective, it fundamentally altered the very fabric of his existence. The once disciplined Air Force veteran found himself navigating a world that suddenly seemed both more vibrant and more fragile than he had ever imagined. His priorities shifted dramatically, with material concerns fading into the background as a newfound focus on love, compassion, and service took center stage. The transformation wasn't without its challenges. Chase grappled with the monumental task of applying the profound wisdom he had gained to the mundane aspects of daily life. How could he reconcile the transcendent love he had experienced with the petty frustrations of traffic jams and workplace conflicts? It was a constant struggle to maintain the perspective he had gained while facing the often harsh realities of the physical world. Chase's efforts to embody the light he had encountered during his near-death experience manifested in tangible ways. He began volunteering at local shelters, offering not just his time, but a genuine connection to those in need. He found himself drawn to mentoring young people, recognizing the potential for positive change in each individual he encountered. These acts of service became a lifeline, tethering him to the divine purpose he had glimpsed beyond the veil of death. The long-term effects of Chase's near-death experience aligned with what researchers have observed in similar cases. He reported a heightened sense of empathy, a decreased fear of death, and a profound shift in his spiritual beliefs. Chase found himself drawn to a more personal connection with the divine, moving away from rigid religious structures and towards a direct relationship with God. Yet even as Chase embraced his new path, he faced moments of doubt and uncertainty. The visions of destruction and chaos he had witnessed haunted him, driving him to act with a sense of urgency that others often found difficult to understand. There were times when the weight of his mission felt overwhelming, and he questioned whether he was truly making a difference. In these moments of doubt, Chase turned to the practice of journaling. He wrote obsessively about his experience, finding that the act of putting pen to paper helped to clarify his thoughts and reaffirm his purpose. Each word he wrote served as a reminder of the profound truth he had encountered, anchoring him in his mission even when the world around him seemed chaotic and uncertain. As time passed, Chase found a deep sense of peace in living out his divine mission. He came to understand that his journey wasn't about single-handedly saving the world, but about igniting small flames of hope and faith in others. He recognized that even in the face of potential global calamities, individual acts of kindness and compassion could create ripples of positive change. Chase's transformation had far-reaching implications, extending beyond his personal sphere to touch the lives of countless others. As he continued to share his message, he became a beacon of light for those searching for meaning in an often dark and confusing world. His story served as a powerful reminder that every person has the capacity to make a difference, carrying the light forward even in the most challenging of circumstances. In the face of global turmoil, could one man's story truly make a difference? Chase was about to discover that hope has a way of multiplying in the most surprising places, creating a groundswell that even he couldn't have anticipated. As Chase continued to share his near-death experience and the urgent message he received, a remarkable phenomenon began to unfold. A growing community of individuals touched by his story started to form around him. These weren't just passive listeners, they were people inspired to take action, to become bearers of light in their own spheres of influence. The challenge, however, lay in translating this inspiration into concrete change. How could the profound truths Chase had glimpsed in the spiritual realm be applied to the complex realities of everyday life? It was a question that weighed heavily on Chase's mind as he watched his audience grow. Yet slowly but surely, signs of hope began to emerge. Chase received messages from people around the world sharing how his story had impacted their lives. A young environmental activist in Brazil wrote about how Chase's vision of a world in peril had reinvigorated her efforts to protect the Amazon rainforest. A teacher in rural India described how he had been inspired to start a program teaching children about unity and compassion. These individual acts of kindness and service began to create ripples of their own. Chase watched in awe as small groups formed in different communities, dedicated to spreading love and light. A neighborhood in Detroit transformed an abandoned lot into a thriving community garden. A group of college students in Tokyo started a mentoring program for underprivileged youth. As these stories of positive change multiplied, Chase began to see the power of collective behavior change. He realized that his role wasn't to single-handedly save the world, but to ignite sparks of hope and action in others. Each person who embraced the message of love and unity became a point of light, illuminating the darkness around them. Amidst the ongoing global challenges, climate change, political unrest, economic inequality, these small acts of kindness and compassion stood as beacons of hope. They served as a reminder that even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds, individual actions could create meaningful change. Chase found himself deeply moved by the courage and dedication of those who had been inspired by his message. He recognized that the light he had encountered in his near-death experience was not meant to be hoarded or kept to himself. Instead, it was a flame meant to be shared, passed from one person to another, growing stronger with each connection. As Chase reflected on the growing movement his story had sparked, he felt a profound sense of purpose. He understood that his journey was far from over. The urgency of his message remained, driving him to continue sharing his experience and inspiring others to action. But now, he was no longer alone in his mission. A community of light-bearers stood with him, each contributing their own unique gifts to the collective effort of creating a better world. Chase Deo's journey had ignited a movement, but what unseen challenges lay ahead? As he stood at the precipice of a new chapter, Chase couldn't shake the feeling that his most significant test was yet to come. Reflecting on the path that had led him to this moment, Chase marveled at the transformation he had undergone. The disciplined Air Force veteran who once viewed life through a lens of routine and control now found himself navigating a world infused with profound spiritual meaning. His near-death experience had not only altered his perspective, but had fundamentally reshaped the very core of his being. Yet, even as Chase celebrated the positive changes his message had sparked, he felt a constant undercurrent of urgency. The visions of a world in peril that he had witnessed during his divine encounter remained etched in his mind, serving as a perpetual reminder of the work that still lay ahead. Each news report of environmental disaster or social unrest felt like a personal call to action, pushing Chase to redouble his efforts. As Chase continued to share his story, his understanding of his role and purpose evolved. He realized that his mission wasn't about single-handedly saving the world, but about igniting small flames of hope, love, and faith in others. These individual sparks, he believed, could collectively lead to significant change. Chase found himself drawn to mentoring young people, recognizing the potential for positive transformation in each individual he encountered. Research on the lifelong impact of near-death experiences supported the profound changes Chase had undergone. Like many who had glimpsed the afterlife, he reported a heightened sense of empathy, a decreased fear of death, and a shift towards a more universal spirituality. These changes weren't fleeting, they had become integral parts of Chase's identity, shaping his interactions with the world around him. As Chase looked to the future, he felt a mix of anticipation and trepidation. The ripples of hope his story had created were expanding, touching lives in ways he could never have imagined. But with this growing influence came increased responsibility. Chase understood that his journey was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. Despite the challenges that lay ahead, Chase found a deep sense of peace in living out his divine mission. He had come to understand that his experience wasn't meant to be hoarded or kept to himself. Instead, it was a flame meant to be shared, passed from one person to another, growing stronger with each connection. As Chase prepared to embark on the next phase of his journey, he reaffirmed his commitment to spreading light. The world might be facing dark times, but Chase Deo was determined to keep shining, illuminating the path towards a brighter future, one soul at a time. Chase Deo's journey from the brink of death to a life of profound purpose serves as a powerful reminder of the impact one person can have. His experience illuminates the potential within each of us to shape the future through our choices and actions. As we reflect on Chase's transformation, we're called to consider our own lives and the ripples we create in the world around us. What if we, like Chase, chose to become bearers of light in our daily lives? The power to make a difference lies not in grand gestures, but in the small acts of kindness and compassion we extend to others. Chase's story challenges us to look beyond our own concerns and recognize the interconnectedness of all humanity. As we conclude this journey with Chase, let us carry forward his message of hope and unity. In a world often shrouded in darkness, we each have the ability to ignite a spark of light. Will you answer the call to be a force for positive change in your sphere of influence?